Understanding and managing project cost is critical to the success of any project. Many people probably view the management of project cost or job cost as being the responsibility of the project manager. Actually, it's a total project team effort. If the team simply awaits the end of a project and totals the cost and then compares that to the amount of the contract to determine the project profitability, the project is likely to be a failure. In order to understand the concepts of project cost management, it is important to understand the basic types or components of project cost. Project cost tracking is usually broken down into four basic elements: labor, miscellaneous materials and expenses, vendors on formal purchase orders, and subcontracts. Some companies will have other divisions of cost, such as equipment, but we will assume any such components are included with one of our four listed areas. To explore each of these areas further, let's first quickly look at a simple example of a project cost report. Most project cost reports have a cost code associated with them, and here on this screen we've got two examples. A description of the work. Some have total units, unit of measure, unit cost, what the original estimate is, the updated estimate based on change orders, the committed cost. Some don't have that, but the committed cost would be a column where you would enter what a contract amount was with a subcontractor or a formal vendor purchase order amount was. Cost to date. This particular cost report has week to date cost, and then a place to anticipate the final cost and then what the anticipated gain or loss would be based on that anticipated final cost. If we look at the second example we had on the screen, you will notice that it too has a cost code, item of work, number of units, unit of measure, unit price, what the original estimate is, what the changes to the estimate were, what the updated estimate is, cost this period, units expended to date, the actual unit cost, cost to date, and then a place to also anticipate final cost. It's important to realize and to remember that the project cost report is a management tool that is produced as a result of costs being entered into the company accounting system. There are both committed cost and uncommitted cost included in an estimate and therefore in our project cost management system. Let's explore our four divisions of cost to further explain this concept. Labor, one of our divisions of project cost, is based on time. Labor is also based on cost or unit cost, that is, cost over time. Labor is also an example of uncommitted cost. In other words, it's not on a formal contract or a formal purchase order, and it can be influenced by things such as productivity, raises, and unforeseen rate changes. Labor is included in the estimate, but that cost may or may not actually be spent at the end of the project. Miscellaneous materials and expenditures include estimated costs that might include screws, nails, tools, travel expenses, living allowances, office supplies, postage, and similar other items. These types of charges are also examples of uncommitted cost. The total final cost for these items is not known in the beginning. They simply represent estimates that must be managed daily. Formal vendors and subcontractors are issued documents, purchase orders, and subcontracts, which represent an agreement between the purchasing party and the person providing the services. Purchase orders and subcontracts are very similar documents. Subcontracts will include labor and materials. Purchase orders will include materials only. Examples of subcontracts would be, for instance, subcontracting with a plumber, or an HVAC subcontractor, or a business to do the framing and the drywall on a project. Examples of something you might issue a purchase order for are to a vendor to provide hollow metal doors and frames, wood doors, finished hardware, toilet accessories, dock equipment, and those type of items. Both subcontracts and purchase orders are based on a predetermined, defined scope of work, and both represent committed cost. And therefore, since they represent committed cost, unless the scope changes, The estimated dollar amount in the cost report and on the contract or the purchase order should be the amount of money that is spent at the end of the project. Labor will need to be managed daily and aggressively to be able to predict the final cost. Unknowns such as production inefficiencies and weather could severely impact the cost. Salaried and hourly personnel may not match up to the estimated costs that were in the original estimate. In other words, the people anticipated to manage the project may be different than those ultimately assigned to the project, and their respective salaries will probably be different than those estimated. Also, sometimes people and workers get unanticipated raises and rate changes during a project. These are common issues that require managers to really pay attention to be able to manage cost and predict the outcome. Miscellaneous materials and expenses can easily get out of control without proper management and communication among the team members. Oftentimes, simple purchases of rough hardware items such as anchors, nails, screws, shots, pins, small tools, and things like office supplies and the like get hard to manage and monitor because the individual purchases may be relatively small dollars, but there are many individual purchases that add up to a lot of money, and maybe they don't show up on the cost report until the end of the month. It takes a management team that's really focused and paying attention to all the purchases, both small and large, that occur on a daily basis to be able to manage this cost and to predict the outcome. Formal vendors and subcontractors on purchase orders and subcontracts should be fairly simple to monitor and manage to the contracted amount of their work. Again, we're assuming that the scope is well defined and that there are no major scope changes, and assuming that our original estimate is good. Understanding the dynamics of these basic categories of cost and constantly communicating with all team members is the key to effectively managing project cost. It is important to understand and to assume any employee responsible for management at the job site level can impact project cost and therefore represents either a resource or a risk with respect to the ultimate cost of a project. And being able to predict the final cost of a project is very important to the success of the business.